right, everybody, this is episode 3. Today we're going to be talking about our lifestyles as Wiccans and the stereotypes that not only we have dealt with personally, but are kind of attached to being Wiccan today.
So being in a lifestyle, it's kind of going back to what is a fashion statement and what is a lifestyle. Like being vegan is a lifestyle. Going to the gym every single day, that is a lifestyle. A fashion statement is something that kind of comes and goes. And just because you feel like it's cool to like dress a certain way, you're not always going to be like that. Well, some people are, but a lifestyle is something that's really long lasting and affects every aspect of your life. So I'm going to start off with, like, for me, being Wiccan fundamentally is you respect all life. So that would mean, okay, so that means you got to be a pro-lifer. That means you got to be vegan because you can't consume any animal products, vegan or vegetarian, both. So that's what I
think vegetarians can have cheese, vegans can't have cheese, and that's how I know the difference.
True enough. There's dairy product involved. But if you're respecting all life, well, then you can't participate in any of that. Well, that's where kind of the lifestyle comes in, where like, okay, well, there's going to be different aspects of it that you got to change or you want to follow, but you have to tailor it to yourself. Stereotypes that you face with that, with being a Wiccan or with witchcraft, is like, okay, so you follow a certain way, you're a tree hugger. I've been called a tree hugger before, but most hippies have. And yeah, essentially, sure, I wear that like a freaking badge. So yes, you are very nature-y. You are very much like, okay, what's being an activist in your environment and knowing what you're putting out to the environment. But that's a lifestyle many people adopt, not just Wiccans. But yeah, there's a lot of information out there about being waste-free, about diets and what you're doing at home that enforces you on a day-to-day routine.
Definitely that there's the difference of the people that definitely want to wear being pagan or being Wiccan as Tiffany said, that fashion statement, but being able to look at what people are saying to you and realize that it is a stereotype, that a lot of times people are more than willing to put badges on you that you're like, well, that's not really me. There are some people that firmly believe you can't be Wiccan without being at least vegetarian or vegan because you have that respect for all nature. But I'm not. I like meat.
I like cheese. I'm addicted to cheese.
I like burgers. I like things coated in cheese and milk gravy, and I'm not sorry about it. But it's definitely understanding something I learned from another podcast, actually, that I can't, Ariel's, I will have to remember what it is in a minute and get back to you. But the fairies took it. But that even if you decide you're not going to be vegetarian or vegan in that lifestyle, that taking that moment before you eat to, thank the creature and the goddess that, you are being able to take their energy and continue sustaining your own life from that. That's definitely something that you can do as to start to change your lifestyle as you're starting to learn and becoming Wiccan. So that's definitely something I enjoy and have learned started to do since I've begun my journey.
So something that I have going on in my personal life is that I am currently in a relationship with a devout Catholic, and I am a devout Wiccan. And a lot of people will turn and look at me and say, how the heck does that work?
Yeah, that was definitely my reaction at first when she's like, oh, he's Catholic. I'm like, oh, that's an interesting choice.
Lots of interesting conversations came from that. But it comes down to there are so many parallels on a fundamental standpoint, like Mollie just said, being thankful and being reflective before you eat a meal. That's the same thing. It's like, okay, you want to do good in the world and you want to help change the world for the better. That is what we talk about. That's the kind of stuff that we do. And it's this lifestyle that okay, well, what can we do to help others? I mean, how can we open our door to people to really make an impact in our community? How can we give back to that? So something that like we talk about at home is like, okay, well, he had some stereotypes associated with me and I had some associated with him. So with me, he's like, oh, so you're going to go walking through the woods barefoot. I'm like, sometimes I do. Sometimes I don't like mud, and that's not always what I do. And it's like, oh, well, it's Halloween. You probably want the whole day to yourself. And I'm like, no, handing out candy is just what I do. And that's part of like my tradition as well. So going back to like just the lifestyles of that, like it can sometimes be challenging for others who don't understand where you're coming from. And it's having that open conversation of like, no, this is what I think instead of what you think I do. Like, I thought, like, I always make the joke of calling it crazy Catholic, but he also calls me, like, you're just a crazy Wiccan. We always joke around with each other. Mm-hmm. But it's having, like, a mutual respect for each other and understanding where the other one is coming from with that open mind and drawing the parallels. Like, oh, I do that too. It's like, oh, I have rituals that I do too.
Yeah.
So...
Well, my fiance is kind of that atheist agnostic. So, but I'm very thankful in the fact that he was always very open and asking questions. That I remember the first couple times he was asking me, what, do Wiccans believe is what comes after death? And anytime I'd start to explain something, he'd be like, okay, well, deeper. And I was thankful for that just because of the fact it made me think deeper beyond...
It challenges you.
Just having someone that I was thankfully there to challenge me and challenge my belief and lifestyle, and he supports it, and he wants to understand it first and foremost, which I'm very thankful of. And knowing how my lifestyle functions and knowing that if I'm doing something, he's like, okay, well, I don't have to ask why you're doing that because this is what you do as a Wiccan and I understand why you do it. And knowing that when we first started dating and all that, he made the joke, well, my girlfriend worships the moon. Which, well, not quite wrong. It was definitely because he didn't quite have an understanding of it. And there are some things that it's one of those when I try to explain to him, he looks like I've grown a third head and started rambling about the end of the earth. But he also understands that, okay, this is how you live. While there are some things you can't explain to others, like it's always, if you started asking someone that, was Christian or Muslim or something the same questions and you kind of took that 2-year-old mentality and go, and just at the end of every sentence go, well, but why? At some point, they just kind of go, well, it's just because the way it is,
That's exactly it. Like, there's not always a correct answer or an exact answer to why you do what you do. Yeah, the stereotypes kind of go into, well, a fun thing that I did when I graduated high school was that I was still kind of that exploratory state, and I was like, okay, well, a friend of mine had just become Jehovah's Witness, and with part of what he was doing, and this wasn't just his religion, this was kind of just who he was, he vanished off the face of the earth. Like, we couldn't find him, we couldn't talk to him, he was still living around here, but he poofed. He isolated himself, and I wanted to know, well, why? What is going on? Why are there these stereotypes associated with these different branches of mainstream religion? So I went on, like, that entire summer between high school and college. I went to every single church I could find, and I started even finding, like, tabernacles that I wanted to go to and, like, Muslim synagogue. I was looking for anything, like, that was going to challenge me and make me see things in a different way. Yeah. And it's when I had, like, it was actually inside a church when I had an aha moment that I'm like, no, I'm not meant to understand this. I'm not meant to follow this. I'm meant to do something else with this because at the end of the day, it's all the same.
Yeah.
There are so many different names for the god and goddess where I've gone to church with my boyfriend and his family is very active in the church and I support that 110% because they're genuinely good people. Now, going back to, like, the fashion statement of things, you kind of have those people who, like, okay, I go to church every Sunday, I say a few Hail Marys and All Fathers, and, oh, I'm fine. I'm forgiven of all sin, and I can go and be a jackass again.
The Easter Christmas Christians, as my family calls them. It's just one of those, the people that are like, oh, well, I went to church, so I can do whatever I want to do because I am absolved of all my sins.
Right, and if that works for you, well, all power to you. But the lifestyle is taking what you're learning and taking the conversations that you're having and making a move in your life, knowing and after, like, taking that and applying it to your life.
Yeah, making a definite change off of the information you're learning. And making sure the information isn't like a biased sense of information.
Absolutely.
That you're happy with the options that you're creating and doing for yourself. And I do want to push over to stereotypes that we've dealt with. I know Tiffany mentioned, tree hugger, and you end up getting a lot of... That's how I ended up having to describe it to essentially my upper management when they asked. Because they were curious. My manager said, she's like, well, it's kind of, that naked hippies in the forest kind of thing. And while that's not true, it was much easier that way than having to be like, oh, well, here's the deeper depths of my religion. And so sometimes using that stereotype to describe is a little easier, but definitely you deal with the people that stereotype as, oh, you're a devil worshiper, or, oh, you're a Satanist. My old roommate was a Satanist, actually.
Oh,
she was a super sweet person. I learned that there is a difference.
There really is.
There's a difference. Satanists are the people that just follow the satanic code, and Luciferians are the ones that are the scary ones, I think. Don't quote me. Don't have any information on that.
Yes, yeah.
So if you are Satanist or Luciferian listening to this and I'm incorrect, I'm sorry.
Yes, that's not our intention at all to create any kind of other stereotypes ourselves. We're very curious, and we ourselves are expanding our knowledge on that. I recently have been doing a couple of, events in local cities that's associated with my tarot stuff, my tarot cards. And I there's a satanic temple. What in the world? And those conversations you have open up your mind to the stereotypes that we have ourselves for others. That's the kind of stuff that needs to be challenged, because we don't want to be a stereotype. We don't want to be treated like a stereotype. We shouldn't treat others like that either.
Exactly. Definitely something that kind of comes up stereotype-wise that I deal with other, I would say, younger Wiccans and pagans that I've talked to. A lot of times we'll be talking to someone that's Christian, and the stereotype, well, I wouldn't necessarily say the stereotype, but the issue, I guess, that I end up dealing with is that a lot of younger pagans will be like, oh, well, Christianity stole that from us. And I almost want to stick with stereotype that Christianity stole things. And the thing is, if it was stolen, it was totally taken and we wouldn't have it at all. And we have to remember that there was a time where being Christian was being prosecuted. So they had to line up their beliefs with ours. So while it's definitely it was difficult, and still is sometimes, especially when, I work in a retail setting and I wear a pentacle or a pentagram, I'm sorry. And it's, something that I have decided, I don't care. This is my religion, and I feel like I should be open about it, and this is how I will show it. Where I have used it as an educated purpose, but I will end up getting a lot of stares and a lot of side eye because, it's a pentagram. And I remember one time somebody had told me that, or it was one of those, she was talking to whoever she was with, and she said that mine was okay. It was an upside down pentagram that meant the devil. And I was like, well, actually, a lot of Wiccans symbolize that an upside down pentagram means that you're out of balance. And it was, it was only a 2 or 3 minute conversation. And I, brought up the fact that it's one of those, we have nothing to do with Satanism. As a Wiccan, I don't even believe in Satan, that, Satan even exists. That is not a person for me. I believe that Jesus might have been a really great guy during the time he was alive, because there's too much record to say he wasn't a human being. But I don't believe, I believe he was just a really great guy that did a lot of great things.
Yeah, and the same can be said for, Mohammed for the Muslims, and I know there's many that I'm forgetting about in the moment, but breaking that stereotype it's breaking, like, the first things that, well, think about, like, taboo words. Think about what the word witch means to you. Think about what the word religion means to you. Sometimes that very word can scare people away, because it's like, oh God, organized religion. Nope, I'm out. It means organization, it means set rules and set boundaries, and you gotta fix yourself into this cookie cutter shape, when no. That's what the stereotypes need to be taken away. Like, that needs to go away and be in a different pocket in your mind, whereas, like, that's needs to be expanded on. That's where the lifestyle comes in. Like, okay, well, what is this person really? It's like, okay, this person is a Wiccan, or they say that they're a Wiccan. Okay, well, what do they do in their life that shows that? I mean, being around with my significant other and his family, they would never would have guessed that I wasn't Christian, because there's when you pass people in the street, you can't tell what they are. You can't tell what faith they are. And it comes down to just, like, who are you as a person, and how does that define you as a person?
Using your actions not only to defy the stereotypes that we're kind of stuck with, as, you know, it's one of those, like, the stereotype of the crazy Catholic, referring to what Tiffany said earlier about her boyfriend. And that something my fiance hates is when he tells people, he's like, oh, well, I'm atheist. That immediately people, like, think he's angry and God-hating. And he just comes down to, he's like, well, it's just not something I really believe in. And because of his past experiences, which I understand, he doesn't have really a strong belief in any God. And that people are more than willing to label, you know, someone based on a word instead of based on their actions. And knowing that you need to not only kind of enlighten people that you're like, oh, well, I know the stereotype for a witch is bubbling cauldrons and bats flying around the ceiling and, you know, cackling and riding broomsticks, that, you know, this is who I really am and this is my lifestyle because of it. Exactly. When you can be open and willing to, because people will come to you and they will, like, people have told me things that, you know, I find rather offensive, but I also have to understand that they don't know. And the only thing they do know about my religion is what mass media has shown them, which is the green, crooked-nosed witch riding a broom across the moon.
Exactly. Or twitch your nose and things happen.
Yeah. It's one of those that you have to be willing to be open to take the stereotype and bring light to it and be like, well, this is why, you know, this is why everybody says that this is what it is. But, you know, this is what I live by and I stand by.
Exactly. I will say, too, going back in a little bit of my history, when I was in middle school and in high school, I had eggs thrown at me because I was that kid who was, again, a little bit different than everybody else. And first of all, I was like a lizard. I was cold 24/7. Anemia would kick my butt, and I was just cold all the time. So I used to wear a really long sweater. And I loved that thing. It was just my thing. It was part of my wardrobe. It was just what I always did. I always wore a sweater no matter how hot it was outside. And one of the books that I gotten from a stepmother who was very influential in my upbringing was about witchcraft and what that really meant. And it had different spells in it, and it had different guided meditations, but it was your typical black book with a silver pentacle on it. So kids in high school ate that up.
Oh, yeah.
So I was a weirdo, I was the freak, and on the playground, sure enough, I had eggs thrown at me, half-eaten Snicker bars thrown at me, and that, people are cruel. People can be cruel when they don't understand something or they feel threatened by something because you're a little different. But I think we live now there is an opening up that's happening in society where that stuff is more open to things. I mean, there's material, like there's books out there now that I wish I had 10 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Because it said, like, this makes sense to me now that I'm reading these things. And life is...
Oh, yeah.
That's the fun thing about a lifestyle, too, is that it's always evolving. It's always changing.
Yeah, things that you're learning today may either apply to you further down the line or may never apply to you at all. People it's one of those, a lot of people seem to think that it's one of those, like, every time I talk to somebody about a familiar, it's always the people are like, oh, so you've got a cat. I am allergic to cats. No, thank you. But the only familiar I've had was actually a rat, and her name was Cookie, and it was one of those that, you know, people would always think she's this big menacing thing, and people think a stereotype for a rat is a, you know, gross, yucky animal. And, you know, she wasn't, and I loved her dearly, and I miss her every day. Now I'm gonna make myself sad. But that definitely these stereotypes that you may almost feel like kind of swamped under, that, you know, you have to remember that people are unfortunately learning from mass media and things like that. And even if people are, you know, forcing that kind of stereotype on you and refusing to listen, that you're the one that purveys that stereotype. So if you really want people to stop being like, oh, well, she's, you know, a witch and disgusting and da-da-da-da-da, you have to be the one that says, well, I'm not disgusting. You know, I don't have cauldrons full of bubbling goo that I'm, you know, and a big wooden spoon that I'm forcing children into the oven with. But that, you know, I'm just a really cool person that likes, you know, taking nature walks and living more cleanly and trying to learn from those in my past that have brought this information down to me. So
right, and like just a different way of thinking, and a different way that like you go about your day, and like a different way you view your family, and like, oh, why do you want to hang around old people? It's like, oh, well, because they are a source of wisdom, not because I'm weird and have no friends. It's because this is what I choose to do. And a lot of times we do get those negative stereotypes. Like, I also come from a retail background where I worked in a retail store, and you get some people who just blatantly don't understand. And we see that more and more, too, with a lot of different stereotypes.
And it's not only do they not understand, they don't care to understand either.
Right.
You also have to learn to know when you're, you know, essentially you're beating a dead horse, where it's one of those, you can give somebody as much information as you want to from 125 different sources, and they all say the same thing, but that person may just not want, you know, they believe in that stereotype, and that's what they want to believe in. And at some point you have to say, well, you know what, that's fine.
Yeah, they're not meant to understand. And also, going back to kind of challenges, it's got to challenge you to be like, okay, I'm not going to let this stereotype define who I am. I'm not going to let this negative experience define what I'm going to do next with my life, or how I'm going to change my life. Just because someone doesn't like it that you're wearing a pentagram or even a cross or whatever, if you're wearing something that is representations of who you are and what you believe in, just because someone is going to come back and look at you funny, or if you feel pressured not to wear it, don't let that stuff stop you. You're going to start giving other people control over who you are.
But always, first and foremost, be safe. If you're not in a safe environment to openly wear a pentagram or something like that, there are, you know, it's very easy enough to, you know, before you get dressed in the morning, if you have a pen just drawing, you know, a pentacle over your heart, or, you know, the triple goddess moon sign on the top of your leg. It may not be full out, you know, blinged out pentagram like a rapper that some people, you know, are willing to wear, but it's definitely a way to, you know, feel closer and feel represented without, you know, putting yourself in danger. You know, you can say, you know, oh, I was just doodling on myself.
Yeah.
While, you know, being able to be in that lifestyle and be present. There's a lot of ways to definitely open yourself up to, you know, information on the god and goddess without having to, you know, and start that lifestyle without having to put yourself in danger. Because if you decide, you know, vegetarian's the way you want to go, it's a lot easier to say, well, I'm being vegetarian because it's a healthier lifestyle. Wherein later you can say, well, I'm vegetarian because of my religious beliefs. I believe that everything is sacred to the god and goddess, so I've decided that I'm just not going to eat meat. Mm-hmm. You know when you're safe, and you know who you're safe to talk to. So those are definitely the places that, well, you can express your lifestyle. You don't have to worry about those, essentially the stereotypes definitely attacking you in places that you are not safe.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a great point. That is a great point.
And going to the mall or something, Spencer's, Hot Topic, stuff like that. There are, jewelries that just have a star and a moon on them that are very simple and elegant that you can get away with wearing. That, yes, it may not be a pentacle, but it represents the goddess and the pentagram to you and how you portray that lifestyle. And so that way when people are all like, oh, you're Wiccan, I didn't know that, you can be like, oh, well, I've been Wiccan since this time period. And when people are like, oh, I would have never guessed, you'd be like, well, it's the lifestyle that, I decide to lead as a pagan. And it helps every person being like, oh, well, I am Wiccan. It definitely helps break those stereotypes of, dancing naked around a fire in the woods and holding up skulls over your head and, chanting in tongues. Being able to say, yeah, well, that's what movies say, but this is the lifestyle I lead as a Wiccan.
Exactly. So. It's literally a spectrum. It's so many different ways of showing the same thing. So you have some people who really do that, where they do walk around naked and they are completely into it.
More power to them.
Exactly. All the power to you. Like, as for me, I mean, I'm right there with Mollie as well. Like, I literally had someone come up to me a couple days ago and ask me because they had a clue that I might be because I wear a necklace or my ring or something. But other than that, I mean, I have to dress professionally for my job, so I have to be very careful what I wear anyway. And that's just whatever your lifestyle fits. Sometimes I like wearing bracelets, and sometimes I will have no jewelry whatsoever.
Yeah. And it's definitely the... through your lifestyle, you can break stereotypes, and learning that when people are like, oh, well, witches are green and haggle creatures, you can be like, well, actually, witches didn't start being green until Wizard of Oz because they got the Technicolor and they really wanted to play with their brand new toy. That is where green witches originated. I learned that on a really cool Salem tour. So,
yeah, That's where wonderful media, and that has been evident throughout history with media in general, like media influencing the masses. So.
Oh yeah, it's definitely where there is the pros to social media and mass media where you can learn more. There's also the cons that people are willing to use it to, create an image for someone that, they've never met. So it's definitely good to remember you can pass someone on the street that might be Wiccan or pagan that you'd have never known. So it's good to definitely focus on, learning that your lifestyle is how you live your life, while the stereotypes that are there for you aren't what make you who you are.
Absolutely. Yeah, it comes down to, like, what do you want to put out there in the world? And, like, the biggest stereotype that's, I think, the easiest to give an example of is who is a stereotypical jerk and who's a stereotypical nice person. So if you're going to be a jerk and, like, let's say not hold the door open for somebody, or you see an old person kind of struggling and they're trying to get a door open and you're just going to walk past them, you're going to hold it open for them. That's stereotype that you build yourself. And like, okay, well, what kind of stereotype do you want to put out there? What do you want to put in the world that represents who you are and what your influence in the world is?
Yeah, definitely. You want to be you essentially want to create your own stereotypes on who you are, instead of being, that stereotypical when people are like, oh, she's a witch. You don't want people to immediately think, oh, you're, kidnapping children and eating them labeled. And being labeled. Yeah, you want people to go, oh, she's a witch? Or she's Wiccan? Because, some people, if you may decide that, witch is a stereotype and you decide you don't want to be called that. You want to be called a Wiccan. So it's one of those taking the information that you have and building yourself up upon it.
Another thing that I want to touch on too, and this just popped in my head, the stereotype of a Wiccan or a witch, the stereotype is that it's mostly female. There are women that want to be this, and honest to goodness, it's not. A man can be a witch. You might want to be called something else, but if you, for our male listeners out there, if you are interested in this, it's not just women. We happen to be women, but
we happen to be two Wiccan women creating this podcast. But you have to remember, it all started with a guy. Gerald Gardner.
Yes.
There are many. Someone that is highly known in the pagan community is an author called Raymond Buckland, who's written countless books that are amazing levels of information. There are hundreds of thousands of men that practice Wicca.
Absolutely. In some way, shape, or form, they might not. They may not call themselves Wiccan, but they follow that pagan umbrella term.
Yeah. So it's one of those. Just because, again, you don't fit into that stereotype of witches are women.
No, you're out there too, guys.
You're out there. You're like sitting there going, well, actually, I'm right here. And that is, that is awesome. That, you're not necessarily you're willing to take a path that not everyone is willing to take, but that you're willing to step out and be like, well, I don't fit into this mold. And that's okay.
Right. Absolutely.
All right. Well, I figured that covers a lot.
We covered a lot of details, I think.
Right. A lot of our lifestyle and stereotypes that we've dealt with.
You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at From the Broom Closet Podcast. You can contact us at fromthebroomclosetpodcast@gmail.com if you have any questions or any topics you want covered.
You can find our podcast currently on iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and other podcasting services. Our episodes are written and produced by Mollie Welton and Tiffany Marie. They are edited by Mollie Welton and Earnest Ma.
We post new content every other Monday.
See you next time. Bye and blessed be.